Hey there, hope you're having a fantastic day in your neck of the woods. This is Michael Does Life, and thank you so kindly for joining us once again, folks, as we continue to talk about this all-new upcoming edition of Resident Evil 3. Folks, if you haven't done so already, do me a favor and strap those seatbelts on because we're getting started right here and right now. So what has Capcom officially publicly said about this all-new upcoming edition of Resident Evil 3? Well, that's what we're going to be discussing here throughout the course of this video. Earlier this year, Capcom had this to say about this all-new upcoming edition of Resident Evil 3. Capcom producer says that the potential of an all-new upcoming edition of Resident Evil 3 begins with the fans. If fans want another entry into the Resident Evil saga to be remade, Capcom says they need to make their voices heard. And folks, that's why I do what I do. I continue to come on here and push really hard and really strong, even in the quietest of times, to say, hey, Capcom, we're still here. And yes, this is something that we are indeed still clamoring for. You know what I mean? And after all, that's how this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2 came about. The fans stuck together and they said, hey, Capcom, remake Resident Evil 2. And finally, after many years, Capcom decided to pull that curtain back to unveil this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2. You know what I mean? And I know so many of you are upset that I clickbait. I know so many of you are upset that we kind of retread through this over and over and over again. But first of all, with the clickbait, it helps potentially spread awareness. And hey, if you stumbled upon one of my videos because of the clickbait and you're here because of that clickbait, it tells me that you're not necessarily educated on this topic. And that presents me with the opportunity to kind of sit you down because you came in because of the sign out front and now you're here and I can say, well, wait a minute, I know the sign's a little deceiving, but here, now that I have you here, I can sit you down and I can explain, I can educate you on really what's happening here in regards to this all new upcoming edition of Resident Evil 3. You know what I mean? And as for kind of repeating myself, well, there's a lot of new viewers here. A lot of new viewers come in on a daily basis. And if again, I have that opportunity to say, hey, this is really what's happening here. This is what Capcom wants us to do. Well, then that presents me with the opportunity to say, okay, let's make this happen. You want to see it come to fruition? Let's stick together and push really hard and really strong, even in the quietest of times, to let Capcom know that, hey, we really want to see this all new upcoming edition of Resident Evil 3. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. You know what I mean? But if we continue to stick together, if we continue to push really hard and really strong, I think that might honestly pressure Capcom into saying, hey, these fans really want to see this happen. Maybe we'll pull the curtain back sooner rather than later. It might encourage them, if we put some positive pressure on Capcom, it might encourage them to pull that curtain back sooner rather than later. So I see it as a win-win situation. We continue to push really hard and really strong to let Capcom know this is something that, hey, we are still indeed clamoring for. They might say, hey, wow, the fan support is really there. Because after all, that is what Capcom's proposal is. If you want to see, folks, this all-new upcoming edition of Resident Evil 3 see the light of day, it begins with the fans. Capcom says they need to make their voices heard. And that's what we're doing, folks. Show Capcom your support by hitting that like button on this video and let me know your thoughts down below on how you think this all-new upcoming edition of Resident Evil 3 should come about.